Hello everyone, my name is Jay Whitner and I'd like to welcome you to a brand new internet TV show that I'm calling Space Headlines. We're going to go over what's happening in space. We're going to go through this twice each month. So welcome to the first edition of Space Headlines. In late September, we had some action by the US House in that they passed a spending bill with NASA in it, funding NASA at $20 billion for 2018. This represents a slight increase over the prior year, and the Senate has been talking about a very, very slightly lower amount, but in general terms about the same. So it looks like we're going to see a NASA budget of roughly $20 billion for 2018 by the time the dust settles. The Cassini mission to Saturn is finally ended. It's always a bittersweet situation when you have a successful mission that comes to its conclusion. But Cassini was launched 20 years ago, and it traveled to Saturn, and it spent the last 13 years studying Saturn, the rings of Saturn, the moons of Saturn, and collected incredible amounts of information. We know so much more about Saturn than we knew prior to this mission. Among other things, the current count on moons of Saturn is 62 moons. A very exciting mission. Congratulations to everyone that was involved in Cassini. And we need to return, but that'll be for another show. Northrop has put in an offer to buy Orbital ATK for $8 billion. This caught a lot of people by surprise in terms of why would Northrop do this? Well, the answer is fairly straightforward. Orbital ATK has great space assets. They have the Antares rocket, they have the Cygnus capsule, they have a resupply contract for the International Space Station. So Orbital ATK is a turnkey solution for Northrop to jump into the space business with both feet. The management of Northrop is convinced that space is where the big money is going to be in the future, and they want their opportunity to access this income stream. And they view Orbital ATK as their path to get there fast. So congrats to all involved for this new giant. I'm not sure what they're going to be calling it, but I guess we'll find that out in due course. So we'll look and see. The Stratolaunch project continues to move forward. If you're not familiar with this, it is the largest airplane in the world. They basically took 2 airframes of 747s and duct taped the two together. So they created, therefore, the biggest airplane ever. And the idea is to do air launch of large rockets. What they did recently was they tested all 6 engines. Everything looked fine. And the hope is they might have their first flight as early as next year in 2018. ESA is working on a moon plan. This, of course, is the European Space Agency, and their Moon Village plan calls for building a big colony on the moon by 2050, which is a quite aggressive timetable. The Europeans want their crack at the moon, and they're releasing some details now of what the vision is for this. They hope to have 6 to 10 people on the moon by 2030, and to grow to 100 people by 2040. And I've seen figures as high as 1,000 people by 2050. So this is quite aggressive that the Europeans want to do, and hopefully we will be standing right beside them for this return to the moon. We had some very exciting news in September for all the Star Trek fans in the space family. After 12 years of waiting, Star Trek is back on the air. And this new series looks very exciting so far. It is set 10 years before the original Star Trek series, which has been such an amazing saga with 13 movies. And this will be the 6th TV series in the Star Trek universe. So look for excitement and fighting with Klingons and all the great Star Trek traditions. I've seen the first couple of episodes already, and it looks mighty interesting. So we'll see how it develops this year. The United States and Russia are talking about the moon, and what the idea here is to not build a lunar base right away, but to do a facility that is in space near the moon. So this is not a firm plan or a budget at this point. This is an expression of mutual interest that both the United States and Russia are interested in working together to develop something in space near the moon. And we'll have to see, where this goes over time. But it is encouraging to see this interest in moving forward in a lunar return. Some of the biggest news in September comes compliments to SpaceX and Elon Musk. A year ago, he unveiled his vision for going to Mars, and at the end of September, he updated that whole vision with several new details and new technologies that he wants to use. To summarize, he spent 45 minutes talking about it. I'm certainly not going to do that. But his concept is this new rocket he's calling the BFR. It's slightly smaller than the rocket that he was talking about a year ago. It is a two-stage, fully reusable vehicle, and it's a monster. It can launch 150 tons into low Earth orbit, more than the Saturn V launched. With orbital refueling, it can reach the moon, deliver a payload, and return. With orbital refueling, it can reach Mars, land, be refueled by indigenous resources on Mars, and then return to Earth. His concept in terms of the timetable is if everything goes perfectly, he thinks he might be able to launch an uncrewed mission to Mars in 2022, and to follow on later in 2024 with a crewed mission to Mars. This is a best case scenario timetable that Mr. Musk himself described as aspirational. So very exciting stuff, definitely groundbreaking if you can pull this off. Lots of challenges and hurdles to overcome. But if there's a person who's shown by their prior acts that they have a good chance at pulling it off, it would certainly be Elon Musk. So we're all pulling for you. Hope it goes really well, and we'll be watching. Lockheed Martin didn't want to be outdone, and they've announced also at the Australia conference some enhancements to their project that they call the Mars Base Camp. The idea at Lockheed Martin was to put a facility in Mars orbit and study Mars from orbit. They've been thinking about that for a while, and they've added a new component, which is very exciting. This is a Mars ascent-descent vehicle. So this is a reusable vehicle that can carry astronauts down to the surface of Mars and back to the base camp. What their intentions are is the vehicle will be spec'd to carry 4 astronauts. They could stay on Mars for up to 2 weeks and then return to the base camp. This addresses one of the biggest complaints I've heard about the plan. The complaint was, we're going to Mars, but we're not actually getting to Mars. So now they've added the actual boots on the ground on Mars to their plan, which I think is a wonderful enhancement to what they're talking about. We only had one really negative piece of news for this period. It has to do with the James Webb Space Telescope. The news is that the launch has been delayed. It's not a huge delay, it's 6 months or so, and they are currently planning to launch the James Webb in early 2019. If you're not familiar with this, it is a huge project, $10 billion, and the mirror of the James Webb is about 7 times as large as the mirror of Hubble. So it should open up a whole new era of astronomy and massive new discoveries. And I think we've waited for a very long time. Certainly 6 months will not cause any great problems to wait a little bit longer. So that's our very first edition of Space Headlines. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to drop me a note. You see my emails right here on the screen, jwhitner@gmail.com. Hope you enjoyed it, and look for another edition in 2 weeks or so. Take care.